Hey, good evening. Tonight, time is running out for residents to get out of Florida. Hurricane Ian, a Cat 3 storm, and getting stronger by the minute. Expected to make landfall in less than 24 hours, bringing with it catastrophic winds and dangerous flooding. The storm already devastating parts of Cuba, bringing torrential downpours and winds of up to 125 miles per hour. The system only getting larger as it barrels towards the U.S. This image, take a look right here, showing its massive scale and flashes of lightning from space. More than 2.5 million people in evacuation zones across Florida. Roads out of Tampa jammed with residents. You see all the cars there, desperate to get out the only way they can. The airport now shut down, and some of those paths out already flooded, if you can believe that, as the rain starts to come down. This stretch of I-95 near Boca Raton nearly impassable. And we're getting our latest radar image we want to show you tonight here on Top Story. Hurricane Ian. Take a look at this monster storm. It's nearly bigger than Central and South Florida combined. We know that it's moving farther south and east than initially expected. In fact, Venice Beach, one of the towns now bracing for a direct hit, and that city's vice mayor will join us live in just moments. But we begin first with our team coverage from all across the storm zone, starting with Guad Venegas in Cuba tonight for us.
Hurricane Ian slamming western Cuba early this morning. Wind gusts up to 129 miles an hour as the Category 3 hurricane tore across the island for more than 7 hours, ripping roofs off homes and blowing debris into streets. 64,000 people were evacuated, many huddled in shelters. This woman describing being moved from one room to another because of fears the glass window would shatter. As people took cover inside, the wind howled outside, ripping trees from the roots and knocking transformers off power lines, damaging the country's already vulnerable grid. 500,000 Cubans are now without electricity. Emergency crews scrambled to protect crops in Cuba's main tobacco-growing region. The owner of one major cigar factory describing the damage as apocalyptic. In the western province of Artemisa, more scenes of destruction. Here in Guanajay, about 25 miles west of Havana, even though we weren't in the direct path of the hurricane, you can see the damage that was caused. Nearly 30,000 people here are without power. The storm took down power lines and even broke windows like this door and their center by the plaza. 72-year-old Humberto lives in a small apartment above this barber shop. He doesn't have much. Humberto tells me this is the worst hurricane he's ever experienced. He has candles, oil lamps, and enough rice, beans, and bread and coffee to last 72 hours. Across the country, the cleanup is just beginning.
All right, Guad joins Top Story live tonight from Havana, where the rain has picked up again. Guad, with so many people without power and a lack of food and medicine before the storm even hit, what's the shelter program like right now for all those Cubans in need of help?
Well, Tom, I mean, there's so many things happening at the same time. The latest official report indicates more than 1 million people are now without power. But we've been talking to anyone we can in Havana, and no one around us has power. Havana has almost 2 million people. And also we have the people in the west part of the country, the hardest hit with that Category 3. But it's been very difficult, Tom, to get in there and try and find out more details. We were actually on our way to the west part of the country, but the roads were covered in trees, the winds, and this was when they told us the hurricane had passed Cuba. We were still unable to get to that part of the country because of the rain, the winds, and the dangers. So we're still assessing the damage. We know that the people had little food that they were able to store at home, and we know that there's going to be no power for a few days. At least that's what we expect. So tomorrow we'll see how people wake up, but there is a lot of damage, and it's still being assessed. And just so you have an idea how things are communicated here, there's no power. There's no way of really using the internet. Maybe you can get something with a phone, but it's the radio, and for people that can actually have a generator and try to watch TV, but really, you know, it's if you have a radio, that's how you're listening, or you're making phone calls to anyone you know that has a phone that's working. So it's very difficult to get information back and forth between that part of Cuba and us here in Havana. As you can see, Havana was not in the path of the storm, but we still have trees all around me in these neighborhoods that were torn down, trees that are blocking the streets. And this is in Havana, so just imagine what things are like right now where that Category 3 passed way west of us here, Tom.
Guad Venegas from Cuba for us tonight. Guad, we appreciate it. For more on Hurricane Ian's path and when it might make landfall in the U.S., I want to bring in Al Roker. So, Al, the big question tonight, what's the latest track?
All right, well, let's show you what we've got. Currently, as we mentioned, Category 3 storm. It's 210 miles south-southwest of Punta Gorda, Florida, 120-mile-per-hour winds. Crossing over Cuba, took a little steam out of it. We expect it to rapidly intensify again, moving north at 10 miles per hour. So at this point, that track is going to bring it right about into just north of Fort Myers sometime Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening. It's going to slow to a walking pace, prolonging that wind, that rain, that storm surge, a severe storm threat. Also, in fact, we right now, Tom, have tornado watches in southern Florida.
Such a serious situation right now in the Sunshine State. I do want to ask you, I know you and your team have been tracking this for several days. Have you guys noticed anything about the track? Is it wobbling one way or the other?
Well, what's interesting, all the models have now come into agreement. And what's going to be interesting is this is going to make its landfall into Tampa and then out past Daytona Beach and curve back in somewhere right along the Georgia, North Carolina coastline and then come back in, probably as a tropical storm, bring heavy rains and possibility of flooding pushing on in here. Now, as we move forward, you're going to see this storm surge. We're talking about these impacts. 8 to 12 feet from Sarasota down to Marco Island, 6 to 9 feet there, less as we get to Key Largo. And as we make our way up and that system curves back in, we're looking at storm surges from Charleston all the way down to Melbourne, Tom.
And now put that storm surge into perspective, because sometimes people hear that, they see that, but they have no idea what that actually means.
The power of water is just unbelievable. So at a 3-foot storm surge, the initial rush of water rises up suddenly. 6 feet, the weight of that water breaks through doors and windows, significant damage. And then 9 feet or higher, that storm surge pushes further inland. Entire neighborhoods can be destroyed relatively rapidly. Now, as far as this system, once it pushes through, we've also got to worry about the winds as well. Significant damages to houses and buildings and passable roads. We could see wind gusts of 120 miles per hour in Sarasota, 108 in Venice Beach, up into Lakeland, Florida, 86-mile-per-hour winds. And that means power outages, significant damage from Orlando to Sarasota. We could be looking at days, if not weeks. And, of course, the rain. We're talking about copious amounts of rain, upwards of 2 feet in some areas, even more possible. Roads into rivers, bridges getting washed out, homes damaged or washed away. A dangerous situation that we are going to be monitoring hour by hour, Tom.
All right, Al, we thank you for being here tonight. And like Al mentioned, Ian is on track to make landfall in Florida, the state on high alert with multiple airports closing tonight and over 2 million residents under evacuation warnings. NBC Sam Brock is on the ground in Gulfport, Florida for us in the danger zone tonight.
In the few hours that remain before Hurricane Ian wallops Florida, an overnight mad dash to flee. Then this traffic jam today on Alligator Alley, cars cramming their way out of Naples and Sarasota as passengers waiting to board those very last flights at Tampa's airport, where operations shut down at 5 p.m.
Every flight that they tried to get me on was booked, taken, booked, taken.
This as state and local leaders plead for people to evacuate.
When you have 5 to 10 feet of storm surge, that is not something that you want to be a part of. And Mother Nature is a very fearsome adversary.
The concerns caroming all the way to Washington, where the president says he's surging hundreds of FEMA officials to the region.
The experts say this could be a very severe hurricane, life-threatening and devastating in its impact.
Across Florida, at least 2.5 million now living in evacuation zones, the vast majority in Tampa's Hillsborough County.
This is the 4th gas station we just tried. All of them seem to be out.
And Pinellas County, where 700,000 should be leaving. But in a place like Gulfport, it's taking some convincing for the older population to sign off on shelters.
You're still mulling over whether or not you're going to stay or go?
Yeah, because I have 2 pets. I have to take 2 dogs with me.
So you're worried that the shelters won't take them?
Not all of them can.
The senior care center team.
We're encouraging the locals to not wait and see what happens.
Reaching out to hundreds of people and arranging all these buses to bring them out of the flood zone, but they largely went unused.
I live 1 block up on the corner.
And you're not planning on leaving that house?
No way.
Why not?
Because I like it there.
Then finally, a breakthrough. 91-year-old Elizabeth Hartman gave in.
Thank you for coming.
And is moving out.
Were you on the fence about whether or not you were going to evacuate?
I was so afraid either way. I didn't know what to do. I have very great fears that the roof might come down on top of me. I just thought it would be much better to be at the shelter.
Floridians facing the reality of a terrifying threat on their doorstep.
All right, Sam Brock joins us now. Sam, we always see that tug of war sometimes with those elderly residents in storm zones. We know the airport is shut down tonight. We're still nearly a day from landfall. Are the winds just too strong? Talk to me about how that decision was made.
So the winds are part of the calculation, Tom. Also, airport officials tell us that they believe that there could be flooding on the airfield itself starting tomorrow morning. So that's also part of the consideration. Look, the bottom line is they view it as an essential service, which is why the airport was left open until 5 o'clock tonight. I was there. I talked to people. They were so grateful to get on those last flights. They wanted to provide that lifeline, but now it's just too late. It's closed down for the immediate future, but it will be one of the first things that opens back up again after the storm.
Sam, it's called Gulfport for a reason there. We see the water is all around you. Talk to me about some of the biggest issues they're facing tonight.
It's a great way to phrase it. Just that, because we know that storm surge, Tom, is the #1 killer in hurricanes. Over my shoulder, this is Gulfport. That's an aquatic preserve. If you look at this aerially, you will see that all of these homes around here and businesses are surrounded by water, not just a preserve, but it's nestled in between Tampa Bay and also you have the Gulf of Mexico. So those three things combined mean you're getting water on all sides surging in with nowhere to come out. And the boats that you see over my shoulder, Tom, I'm told during a tropical storm or depression end up in the street. Can you imagine what this is going to look like in a Category 2 or 3 hurricane? Tom?
Yeah, still several boats out there behind you. All right, Sam Brock for us tonight. Sam, thank you for that. More than 10 counties in Florida under those evacuation warnings Sam mentioned, one of those being Sarasota County. Our next guest coming to us from Venice, Florida, located in Sarasota County. He's the vice mayor of Venice. His name is Nick Pashota. Nick, thanks so much for joining Top Story tonight. So when we look at the track of the storm, Nick, and I'm sure you've seen this, Venice is pretty much in the bullseye of this massive hurricane. What's your biggest concern right now as a vice mayor?
Right now, the biggest concern is making sure that all of our residents heed the evacuation warnings that have been issued by the county. We want everyone to be safe. We don't want to take any unnecessary chances. As far as public service is concerned, we're prepared. We're ready to go. We're hunkered down and waiting until the storm passes so that we can get out there and provide the services our citizens come to expect. But the most important thing right now is just please don't take chances. Evacuate if you're in an evacuation zone. Go somewhere safe. There's no need to be here. There's no need to chance it.
Who are the people that you have forced to evacuate? We know there's certain zones in Sarasota County that people had to leave.
So, yeah, right now we're in our current zone A and B. That's pretty much our barrier island. Venice has a 2.2 square mile island. We're going to be closing off the water supply to that island this evening just because of the infrastructure. So,
yeah, Nick, talk to me about that, though. Are those people, will there be anybody left on that island, or are you making people get out? I know since you just mentioned you're shutting off the water.
Yeah, we can't force anyone to leave, but it is a very strong recommendation that everyone leaves. And we do have, our public services in the area, but they won't be able to provide service until after the storm passes. Our public safety will go out after the storm and we'll do the best we can. But it really puts a burden on the public safety if people stay after we've advised them to leave.
What does an 8 to 12-foot storm surge mean for the people in your area?
Severe flooding, devastating infrastructure damage, could be long waits to get power and water supply back. It's not as quick as people think. I mean, it's a long time since we've had a major storm.
Yeah. Nick, while we still have you there real quick, I know you sort of have this problem with two different groups that live in Florida. You have the people who've lived there for a long time. We heard them in Sam's report. They don't necessarily want to evacuate. You also have a ton of new Floridians who have moved there since the pandemic. How much are you struggling to get the word out that people need to leave if they're in a dangerous area?
It hasn't been a struggle. I mean, we've definitely messaged through every means of communication that we have. So I'm not too concerned about the messaging. It's more so just, a lot of newcomers, they need to understand that this isn't a joke. This is very serious. And I think the last time we've had something so serious was back in Hurricane Charlie in 2004, and a lot of people don't remember that, but it was very serious.
All right, Nick Picciotto, the vice mayor of Venice in Florida. Nick, we will be thinking about you and all your residents there. Good luck. As officials plead with residents to evacuate, experts warn Ian could bring deadly storm surge to Florida's west coast, with some parts expected to see walls of water up to 12 feet tall. Here's NBC's senior national correspondent, Kerry Sanders.
The waters of the Gulf of Mexico are warm, as high as 89 degrees, a high-octane fuel for hurricanes. With a shallow seabed along the Gulf Coast, the perfect combination for catastrophic storm surge.
Shallow water is actually easier to pick up and lift and blow up onto the land than it is in deep water. And so the same wind on the west coast of Florida will have substantially greater storm surge than it would on the east coast of Florida.
I've experienced it firsthand. This is what storm surge looks like. It's a fast-moving, fast-rising flash flood with the power of the Atlantic Ocean behind it. What causes that building wall of water known as storm surge? 100-plus mile-per-hour winds whipping across the surface of the water, piled higher and higher. The storm surge, combined with high tide, may cause water levels as high as 10 feet above normal, overwashing beaches and potentially traveling miles inland. I'm at about 2 feet above sea level, which means a 5-foot storm surge would come in about here. A 10-foot storm surge up there. In some cases, the storm surge could wash over Florida's barrier islands.
Water does the most damage, it kills the most people, and it takes the longest to recover from.
Anyone with a mortgage in a flood zone is required to carry federal flood insurance, but wind damage is covered by your homeowner's policy. In Florida, 6 insurance companies have claimed insolvency just this year. Homeowners complain those that are still in business here have jacked up premiums.
I'd say probably about a 30% increase for myself. Others, I've seen them, rise 50%, 100%, and some have just been canceled altogether.
Kerry Sanders joining us now from Anna Maria Island, Florida. Kerry, we were just talking last month about building codes and how they changed in South Florida after Hurricane Andrew. What do we know about the Tampa-St. Pete area?
Well, we do know that the building codes for the South Florida building code got a lot of initial resistance from developers because it raised the cost of construction. So that became the rule for South Florida, and some communities around the state have adopted pieces of that building code, but it is not a statewide building code that has that. So, we're looking at Tampa, we're looking at St. Petersburg, we're looking down at Sarasota. I'm in Manatee County. You're going down to Lee County. These are explosive communities that have just seen incredible growth, especially down in Lee County. And so there's been pushback. And the other piece of the puzzle is that there can be all the codes you want. There also needs to be inspectors and enforcement. And after Hurricane Andrew, it was learned that most of those inspections were just sort of a glance out the window of a car driving by. Nobody really inspected. Things have changed, but there will be a test here if this is a Category 4 coming ashore south of where I am.
No doubt. So, Kerry, I guess this maybe leads to my next question. You spent so many years covering hurricanes, so many hurricanes. What concerns you the most about Ian?
I think the greatest concern, and this is always sort of a reminder, that it is not the wind and the debris that hits somebody and kills them in the head. That does happen. But the leading cause of death here is from water. So we think about, as you look out here over my shoulder, of the Gulf of Mexico, and we talked about that storm surge. But there's another piece of the puzzle here that people probably are not thinking about, which is this is a very slow-moving storm dropping a lot of rain. And we have seen recently in some storms that the amount of rain afterwards leads to flash floods, and people are out thinking that they're clear to go. And it only takes about a foot and a half for a flash flood of water to pick up a car and move. People drown in this, and so you really need to think not only about preparation for the hurricane, but after the hurricane. Don't go out. We see way too many people dying after hurricanes, Tom.
Kerry Sanders, part of our massive team covering Hurricane Ian there in the storm zone. Kerry, we appreciate your reporting. We want to turn now to another story we've been following all throughout the day. Protests across Virginia. Thousands of students walking out in response to Governor Glenn Youngkin's proposed transgender policies. Students from nearly 100 schools protesting a new rule that would restrict which pronouns are allowed in classrooms. That policy expected to take effect after a 30-day public comment period, which began yesterday. Yamiche Alcindor joins Top Story tonight live. Yamiche, walk our viewers through what exactly these students were protesting and what changed in Virginia public schools. Did it essentially reverse the previous policy when it came to transgender students?
Well, a big day in Virginia today, as you saw, thousands of students walking out, as you said, at nearly 100 schools. They're protesting a new school transgender policy that was just released last week by Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin. It does a number of things to your question. It requires parental approval for any changes to students' names, nicknames, and/or pronouns, and tightens parental notification requirements for schools. It also limits the use of facilities like bathrooms or locker rooms to the gender assigned at birth, with modifications offered only to the extent required under federal law. It also limits student participation in school sports to the gender they are assigned at birth. And it says that parents must be given the opportunity to object before counseling can be given to students. So this is in direct contrast to what happened under the previous administration. That was the Democratic governor. In that administration, schools were told that you have to call students and by their pronouns that they prefer, and they didn't have to ask the parents. So the big issue here really is the involvement of parents. Students are saying that they want to have a voice in their pronouns, and they also don't want to be outed by their schools to their parents, with some closeted students feeling they are scared that teachers could tell their parents what's going on with them before they're ready for that. So a big contract, a big change here from the previous administration.
Yamiche, do we know if the Youngkin administration has said anything about the protests today?
Yes, they have. So there was a spokesperson for Glenn Youngkin who released a statement. I want to read part of it. It said, parents should be part of their children's lives. And it's apparent through the public protests and on-camera interviews that those objecting to the guidance already have their parents as part of that conversation. While students exercise their free speech today, we'd note that these policies state that students should be treated with compassion and schools should be free from bullying and harassment. So that's the Glenn Youngkin administration comment on that. But again, students are saying that they want to make sure that their parents can't dictate what their pronouns are, what their genders are. And also this is part of a bigger national movement when you think about the fact that not only in Virginia are you seeing these policies, but you're also seeing the Don't Say Gay, the so-called Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. You're also seeing places like Alabama, a place that I visited and where I've interviewed people, criminalizing gender-affirming care for some students. So this is really part of a larger movement where Virginia students are saying, like other students, we are protesting this, and even as minors, we should have more say in the way that our gender and pronouns are used.
Yamiche, briefly, do we know if this case in Virginia, this new policy that's been proposed that should take effect in the next 30 days, do we know if it's going to be challenged in court?
My understanding is that there are going to be court challenges. We've seen court challenges on other policies around the country, and it seems as though there are groups that are getting ready to sue or to at least put up legal challenges to this in Virginia. So definitely a place to watch, a space to watch as this continues.
Yamiche Alcindor making her top story debut. Yamiche, great having you on the show tonight. We thank you. We want to turn to another big story we're following, the market, specifically the housing market. New information today shows that while housing prices are up nearly 16% year over year, it's a big drop from the price increase a month earlier. It's a fast-changing market. Emily Aketa now on how you can navigate it.
Buying a home keeps getting more expensive. Rates for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage eclipsed 7% today for the first time in 20 years, according to one industry report.
To put this in perspective, that rate was 3% at the start of this year.
Today's rate means a difference of $850 a month on a typical mortgage payment for a median-priced home compared to a year ago, making buying increasingly out of reach for Americans.
It's disheartening.
In August, existing home sales fell 20% from last summer as more wannabe homeowners like Samantha Baker take their foot off the gas.
I found out I could afford less and less, even with zero debt and, only a car payment.
Sky-high mortgage rates are also sidelining would-be sellers. Redfin reports a steep decline in the number of homes hitting the market, slumping 19% compared to last year.
We know high mortgage rates have priced out buyers, but what's the impact on sellers?
High mortgage rates end up locking in homeowners who fixed a low mortgage rate before. So if you're a homeowner who has a 3% mortgage rate and you're thinking about buying again, it's going to cost you around 40% more to buy the exact same home.
As mortgage rates go up, home prices are ticking down, but only slightly, less than 1% decrease between June and July, according to industry data out today.
Even though there's less demand, there still isn't enough supply, and that keeps prices high.
For buyers undeterred by rising mortgage rates, experts say first, establish a budget and factor in the ongoing cost of home maintenance. Try to build up your credit score and shop around for competitive rates before you lock one in. Tom?
All right, Emily, we appreciate that. For a more in-depth look at this changing housing market and what today looked like on Wall Street, I want to bring in NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chung again. Brian, so have sellers gotten the message yet? Are they bringing the prices down? Or are they still playing that waiting game we've seen the last few months?
Well, Tom, based off of the economic data that we got this morning, it seems like sellers are getting the message that the demand for houses just simply aren't as high as they used to be. However, with mortgage rates going above 7% today by some measures, the expectation is that with the Federal Reserve, we talked about this last week after their last interest rate hike, going to continue to raise interest rates through the end of this year. The expectation is demand can only go down from here.
Okay, and then something else big happened, right? We got some numbers on the price of lumber down to pre-COVID levels. Explain to our viewers why that's so important.
Well, what we're seeing in terms of the price of lumber is pretty remarkable when you consider that $429 per 1,000 board feet. That's substantially down from about $1,400 earlier this year.
$1,400, now it's $429.
Now
wow.
it's $429.
Okay.
What that tells you essentially is the demand for lumber is down. Home builders are just paring back. We had economic data last week that showed the amount of permits for new home builds, in addition to housing starts, was substantially lower than it was earlier this year. Home builders know that people are not going to be demanding as many houses. They're not building as much.
What are experts saying? Sometimes people just need to sell their home. Sometimes people need to buy a home. What should people do in the situation right now? Because there seems to be so much uncertainty.
Well, the real challenge, Tom, is that we're looking at aggregated data, and it's really going to depend on what market you're looking at. For example, you look at San Francisco, Seattle, San Diego. These are metropolitan areas that actually saw housing price declines from the period between June and July, down between 2 to 3%. But there are still some hot markets as well, literal hot. You look at Tampa, Miami, areas where home prices remain very elevated.
Oh, Miami, they're still high. I hear about it from friends and family all the time. Finally, before you go, talk to us about the markets today. Another bad day in the markets.
An extension of the pretty serious sell-off that we saw at the end of last week. We saw the NASDAQ actually up about 0.25%, but the Dow Jones and the S&P down today, extending what we've already seen in terms of a 2022 low that really is just underscoring how terrible it's been for stock market investors this year.
It started well, right? The day started well, but then it started to tank.
Underscoring just how jittery investors are right now. The story is that bear market bull that we saw in the middle of this year between June and August, it seemed like maybe we hit the bottom. The declines we've seen in the past few days showing we haven't hit the worst yet.
Yeah, flash in the pan. All right, Brian Chung, always great to have you, man. Thank you. Still ahead tonight, the tragic ski accident involving a famed American mountaineer. The mother of two falling near the peak of one of the world's tallest mountains. The search efforts now underway in Nepal. Plus, new video from a Wawa that was ransacked by teenagers in Philly. You may have seen the video a couple days ago. This is new video. What police are now calling on the parents of those kids to do. And the new images of that cosmic collision we brought you last night right here on Top Story. The view you haven't seen just yet. Top Story getting started on this Tuesday night. We're back now with an urgent rescue mission in Nepal. A renowned American ski climber going missing after falling into a deep crack off the 8th highest mountain in the world. Her partner rushing down the mountain to look for help just before an avalanche tore down the same slope. NBC's Raf Sanchez has more.
Tonight, rescuers in Nepal continuing their search for a famed U.S. ski climber a day after she fell off near the peak of Mount Manaslu, the world's 8th largest mountain. Hillary Nelson was skiing down the 26,775-foot summit with her partner, Jim Morrison, when she reportedly fell into a crevasse below the summit. This, according to the Himalayan Times, who quoted an eyewitness saying she fell approximately 80 feet. Over the weekend, weather conditions worsening. This video captured on Friday showing the moment an avalanche cascades down the mountain. In an Instagram post 5 days ago, Nelson writing, quote, "I haven't felt as sure-footed on Manaslu as I have on past adventures into the thin atmosphere of the high Himalaya. These past weeks have tested my resilience in new ways." Morrison also hinting at dangerous conditions, posting about the pair's failed summit attempt. On Monday, another avalanche swept away several climbers at a lower elevation, killing a guide and injuring others. Sherpa, one of the injured, said there were 13 to 14 people swept away by the avalanche, all of them now accounted for. Nelson still missing. Nelson, a professional ski mountaineer and team captain for the North Face athlete team, is no stranger to difficult climbs. The North Face calling her, quote, the most prolific ski mountaineer of her generation, with a career spanning 2 decades, dozens of first descents through more than 50 expeditions to 16 countries. The first woman to link 2 8,000-meter peaks, Everest and Lhotse, in a 24-hour push. She returned to Lhotse, the world's 4th highest mountain, in 2018 to ski from the summit with Morrison. Our affiliate KUSA speaking with her at the time.
Nobody has ever done it before. No, not in its entirety. And so I'm super, I feel like a little kid. I'm like giggling about it.
North Face in a statement saying, we're in touch with Hillary's family and supporting search and rescue efforts in every way. Her fate remains unknown, though a family member who spoke with NBC News said it's no longer a search mission, but rather one of recovery. For Nelson's partner, Jim Morrison, this is not the first major accident to touch his life. He lost his wife and 2 small children in a plane crash back in 2011, an almost unimaginable level of grief for one person to bear. Tom?
So horrible. I can't even imagine. Okay, Raf. Coming up, the shootout involving an undercover officer in Detroit. A state trooper shot while surveilling a possible drug operation. News on his condition tonight. All right, we're back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with a shootout in Detroit that sent a Michigan state trooper to the hospital. The undercover officer was surveilling a potential drug operation when a suspect began firing from a second-story window, hitting him multiple times. That trooper now in stable condition. After an hours-long manhunt, state police arresting 2 suspects. They have not yet been charged. And you may have seen this video from a Wawa in Philadelphia over the weekend. A mob of young people ransacking the convenience store, some throwing items at the cashier. Police now releasing even more footage, showing the flood of teens rushing through the doors, others jumping on cars outside. So far, no arrests have been made. Police now asking parents to watch those clips closely and to contact authorities if their child was involved. And last night, we brought you the view from 7 million miles away. Now, our first look from right here on Earth. A telescope in Hawaii, take a look, capturing the moment NASA's DART spaceship smashed into an asteroid. Another in South Africa showing the impact in black and white, and an Italian satellite that was following behind the NASA ship. You may remember we mentioned this, catching the view from space. NASA scientists celebrating the first of its kind mission, a test of the planet's defense capabilities. It will take several more weeks to get full results. For the first time in 7 years, new video shows trucks carrying aluminum and medicine crossing the border Monday. Colombian President Gustavo Petro joining spectators at the crossing. The 2 countries restoring diplomatic relations after Venezuela closed the border in 2015 amid a smuggling crackdown. Japan holding a rare state funeral for slain former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Japanese officials and Abe's family gathering in Tokyo to remember the nation's longest-serving prime minister. World leaders, including Vice President Kamala Harris, in attendance. The ceremony also drawing thousands of protesters outside the venue, with many in the country divided over his political legacy. Abe was gunned down at a campaign event back in July. Time now for the Americas, and here in the U.S., the largest Chicano art collection is finally getting a home. The collection, known as the Cheech, named after the donor and American comedian Cheech Marin. The collection includes hundreds of works from Latino artists obtained throughout Marin's career. To see these paintings is one thing, but to hear Marin talk about them is a whole different story. Here's NBC's Gotti Schwartz.
But I love the colors.
Spend enough time exploring how Chicano icon Cheech Marin sees art, and you're liable to get your mind blown.
Whoa, this is tripping me out. Yeah, I just discovered these 2 white doves.
Today, the Cheech and Chong counterculture comedian turned actor,
is that a joint, man?
Turned art collector is helping redefine how the fine art world sees the work of contemporary Latinos by donating what's believed to be the largest private Chicano art collection in the world.
I always get asked, what are the determination of the paintings you pick? And for a lot of them, they have to haunt me. and I have to dream about them.
And at a new museum in Riverside, California, nicknamed the Cheech, his dreams are now adorning gallery walls in a way that has eluded the community for decades.
Why aren't these guys, these painters, men and women, and they're not in galleries, they're certainly not in museums, why aren't they getting any shelf space? My only intention was to get everybody to see it.
And now the art speaks for itself.
And now the art speaks for it. It always spoke for itself, but you have to get to the place where it can speak.
For visitors of all ages,
I was blown away by some of the art.
This museum, to me, feels like home. It feels like the vibrant colors in our house.
You see these paintings.
Art, heritage, and color, reflecting a community, finally on full display for all to see.
Gotti joins us now from Los Angeles tonight. Gotti, do we know how Cheech got so into art?
Yeah, Tom, he tells me he's always liked collecting things. Way back in the day, he was a collector of baseball cards when he was a little kid. Then he grew up. He made some money in Hollywood. Then he started collecting Chicano art. He was blown away at how cheap it was, he says, because it hadn't found its way in the mainstream. So he just started scooping up as much of it as he could. And the next thing you know, he became this almost like art historian of Chicano art.
It's a beautiful story, Gotti. And, one of the things about seeing a collection is that you see all this sort of magnificent artwork in one place. What did that feel like?
Well, Tom, in the piece, you hear him talk about how he would only buy art that haunted him or that he dreamt about. Well, ever since we visited that museum, there is this one piece that I keep thinking about. I remember back in the day when you would get Cracker Jacks and inside there was that little hologram thing and you would look at it and it would shift? Well, Cheech commissioned a 2-story lenticular by the De La Torre brothers, who are these incredible artists. And you look up, and it is this ancient Aztec deity, the creator and destroyer of worlds. And so you stand in one place, and then you move over, and then all of a sudden you see Earth, and then you move over, and then all of a sudden you see this Aztec deity. It's just like looking into different dimensions. Leave it to Cheech to alter your mind on art,
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, and it's amazing that he's donated all this art. All right, Gotti Schwartz for us tonight. Gotti, we appreciate it. Thank you for watching tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.